Hello everyone, my name is 4AS and welcome to my channel. This is a series of video essays where I cover political, economic and revolutionary topics which are relevant to our time. I read the books so you don't have to. In a world where money rules the land, there is one critique that is left unspoken. Integrity leads to innovation. Innovation leads to inequity. Inequity leads to insanity. Join me as we explore the four eyes of capitalism. If this is your first time here, consider subscribing for more content in the future. So, let's jump right in. Most people, when you talk to them, would assume that there are two broad classes of company structures. The first being a for-profit company, where it focuses on its shareholders and maximizing profits. All things that would make Milton Friedman proud. And the second, being non-for-profits that focus on promoting the values of its members and advocating for the well-being of sections of the community. Think a charity receiving a grant to service a disadvantaged group. But not many people think of a third option, cooperatives. Now, the difference with a cooperative is the establishment of a bottom-up structure to the company. At the end of the day, a for-profit company is beholden to its shareholders. Even the CEO of a company knows low profits are bad for business. Even not-for-profits are beholden to its board and have strict agreements with sponsors to use grant money for certain communities. The top-down structure can be seen with a little bit of investigation. What makes cooperatives bottom-up is the idea of economic democracy in the workplace. An ordinary worker's vote influences executive decisions in the company. But I'm getting ahead of myself. To understand economic democracy and cooperatives, I'll let Dr. Richard Wolff explain. If democracy is valuable, how in the world did we come to be in a society that doesn't make them valuable and applicable in the place we spend most of our adult lives? 5 out of 7 days, 9 to 5, you're at work. That's where your lifetime as an adult is mostly spent. If democracy is a value, then it would have to apply there. By what rule was it excluded at the front door? And let me drive home the conclusion of where this leads. Imagine that the workers in the enterprises of America ran the businesses themselves. Here's how it might look. Monday to Thursday, you come to work like you always did, and you did your particular task, whatever that is. On Friday, you come to work like you always did, but you don't do your particular task. You sit around all day with all the other workers and you debate and you discuss and you decide collectively, democratically, by vote, what to produce, how to produce, where to produce, and what to do with the profits. It's good to think of economic democracy as a cooperative framed way of explaining stakeholder theory. Workplaces cannot function without workers, so by giving workers a say, it will produce a more democratic way of how the corporation deals with the general public. A for-profit company may dump waste products in the local river, if it can get away with it, of course, but it's unlikely a cooperative company would sack half its factory staff just to save on costs. The shareholders are the workers. It's at this time it may help to explain economic democracy by investigating the history behind the world's largest cooperative, Mondragon. Now, Mondragon was founded by a Spanish priest, and you're going to have to excuse me on my pronunciation, Don Jose Maria Azmendiareta. During 1941, where Don Arias Mendiareta came onto the scene in the Basque region, the Mondragon area was run by an iron company called Unión Cerrajera that was owned by 6 families and was the main employer. Education and training was limited to the sons of employers and a few chosen others. This amounting to 15% of potential eligible boys getting technical education from Unión Cerrajera. However, Don Arias Mendieta came from the seminary at Victoria, his teachers believing in a teaching style of investigating rather than learning. This way of pedagogy induced curiosity in students, where the priest developed a following. In Mondragon, Arias Mendieta responded to the restrictions of the apprentice school by bringing boys, parents, and town leaders together, first in establishing a football pitch and league, and then buying and operating a movie theatre. These activities generated support from 600 citizens and small businesses who raised funding to build an independent technical school. Cooperatives are born out of an ethos to invest and cooperate with other community groups and actors in the region. Hell, it's this sort of mentality that motivated Sir Richard Branson's most famous quote about workers. But again, don't take my word for it. You can read about Don Arias Mendieta's philosophy from the Mondragon Project. This perspective persists today in the Mondragon Corporation's motto, Humanity at Work. In Arias Mendieta's words, human beings are made human through education. Civilization progresses at increasing pace only through formative and educative action along the searching path for human and social values. Whilst focusing on the moral and social education of students at the technical school, Arias Mendieta not only prioritized people over profits, but also saw them as a lever towards creating citizen self-government and greater social justice. From there, Mondragon had expanded its influence where it increased cooperatives under its corporation umbrella. The Mondragon cooperative strategy for global competitiveness was in some ways very successful. In 2009, the Mondragon Group as a whole accounted for 3.5% of the Basque country's GDP and 7.1% of the industrial GDP, creating a total added value of $2.284 billion. In 2008, Mondragon employed more than 90,000 people. Whilst the economics of cooperatives can be impressive, it's the no one gets left behind mentality of these organizational structures that should be noted. It's not in success that we learn about who people are, but in their failures. And this was certainly the case with the failure of Fagor Electrodomesticos, who was a domestic appliance producer. Just before the global financial crisis between 2005 to 2007, FE had investment in local and foreign non-cooperative firms in order to compete with multinationals within its industry. However, when the effects of the GFC hit in 2008 and 2009, the sale of white goods hit the floor and FE weren't able to recover. FE made a recovery plan that was backed by a loan of 300 million euros from Mondragon Co-operative Corporation and an unanimous decision by all the other 120 cooperatives to devote 1% of their salaries to rescue Fagor. When the planned results were not achieved and FE's decline was compromising the viability of other cooperatives, finally, in 2013, the General Assembly of the Mondragon Co-operative Corporation decided to allow this flagship of the Mondragon movement to fail. Where this failure would have been an unmitigated disaster for a standard business, in Mondragon, inter-cooperative solidarity kicked in. None of the remaining 2,000 Basque workers were made redundant, and all were relocated to other companies, took an early retirement, or entered education so as to gain skills and take on new roles in other cooperatives. Let that sink in. In a for-profit company, they would have just sacked the amount of staff necessary for a business to stay afloat. But since Mondragon had a network of cooperatives in order to collaborate and lean on in a time of crisis, such as the after effects of the GFC, they were able to hold on to all the staff of Fagor, even though the company couldn't be saved. brings a new meaning to the phrase, when there's a will, there's a way. Well, in a corporate space, at least. But I'm sure you must be asking, well, why is this the first time I've heard of a cooperative? If it was such a successful business model, wouldn't it be worldwide? Well, the funny thing is, you have seen some around, but never even realized it. An alternate structure to a co-op is a mutual. Now, the definition of a mutual is a member-owned organization where people come together to meet their shared needs. The members of a mutual are its customers, who do not usually contribute to the capital of the organization through direct investment. Instead, they support the mutual through using its services. In Australia, two big names that are mutuals that you'll immediately recognize are HCF and NRMA. Bet you didn't realize they weren't for-profit companies. They've done a good job at blending in with this thing we call society. But are co-ops and mutuals successful? Well, one of the prima facie weaknesses of co-ops is investment and capital. You can't simply have a Bruce Wayne figure step in and get a co-op off the ground. As I mentioned in a previous video essay, co-ops are governed by a code that originated in the Rochdale Principles: voluntary open membership, democratic member control, member economic participation, autonomy and independence, education, training and information, cooperation among cooperatives, and concern for the community. Having an angel investor or an investor that isn't a worker goes against the ethos of the operational business structure. Okay, so how is this solved? A good first step involves ESOPs. Individual employee ownership can be facilitated through the Employee Share Ownership Plan, which provides tax incentives to participant companies and their employees to encourage employee financial participation in the enterprise. Employees have the option of purchasing shares in the company, with the cost partly offset through individual tax incentives. ESOPs are typically quite limited in scope, being used more as a tax-efficient way of combining profit-sharing incentives with an attempt to influence the perception of employees that their interests are aligned with those of their employing organization. ESOPs are a microeconomic start to economic democracy. When a worker joins a co-op, they use salary sacrificing within the business to buy the necessary shareholder quota to be a full member of the team. So when a worker joins a cooperative and gets more involved in the operations of the business, they become a fully fledged member of the co-op. Their shareholder standing reflects how active they are in the organization. Again, you might ask, but how do co-ops start out? Obviously, ESOPs may be useful in an established co-op, but the capital problem comes front and center if you want a loan. Good luck getting a loan from the big four banks in Australia. Well, the short answer to the question is to go to the cooperative network, because there are people's banks and credit unions out there. For example, in Australia, one of the most established B Corp people's banks is Bank Australia. But the long answer is much more complicated. It's a macroeconomic factor called community wealth building projects, which will need to be tackled on a future video. If you haven't already, please like, share, and subscribe for more content in the future. And remember, folks, to keep thinking and keep learning. Goodbye till next time.